And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. Hopefully, you guys are going to be extremely excited about this episode because if you can see the person on the screen right now, you know we're all in for a treat. We have Jake from Pokenomics, one of my favorite people in the hobby, and believe it or not, in all the lives I've ever had and all the lives Jake has ever had, this is the first time me and Jake are ever going to have an actual one-on-one conversation about this hobby. There's always been one other person who's joined us during the chats, so this will actually be a first, which is pretty amazing after all these lives. And yeah, with that said, we have some pretty cool topics tonight. I think we're gonna go and more do some reflection on the hobby, talk about how the hobby maybe has changed for the better, for the worst, has it stayed the same? We're gonna have a pretty in-depth conversation with that and just kind of reflect in. But before we get into the meat of the conversations, first, I just want to say, Jake, thanks for coming on this channel and anything exciting or new in the world of Pokemon for you, or just life in general?
Not too much. As you know, I've been dealing with a little bit of a back injury that we were talking about a little bit
Yeah.
before I came on, which is why I haven't been part of why I haven't been streaming or doing as much content. I haven't really been able to like sit in the chair for hours, but I'm feeling better. And yeah, like I love talking Pokemon and always really enjoy talking to you. So I'm happy to be here, and I think we'll have a great time tonight.
No, yeah, and I appreciate it, and I always appreciate just all the content you put out too. I think you bring some really awesome insights to the hobby, but kind of the meat of this conversation is I wanted to do a little bit of just reflection because when we sit back, we talk about where the hobby is today. We talk about the hype that was 2020, 2021. And sometimes I'm thinking like, wow, this hobby has drastically changed. And then other times I'm kind of looking and listening to people and I'm like, maybe things haven't really changed as much as we might tell ourselves things have changed. But one of the reasons I wanted you on to have this conversation is because you bring an extremely good perspective because of your Pokenomics Patreon you have. In that Patreon, you have I think it's like monthly, you call them office hours, and then you do your monthly lives and presentations. And during your office hours and stuff like that, you're interacting with a very wide range of people in this hobby, like a big spectrum that a lot of people don't deal with on a daily basis because you are dealing with people on the highest end of trophy card collectors who are really going after some of the grails in the hobby. But also with your Patreon, you also have people in there who are maybe a little bit newer to the hobby, just starting to dive down that rabbit hole and get their feet wet. But so yeah, I think you're going to bring that good perspective. But let me ask you, when you think back on 2020, 2021, and where we are today, do you think the hobby has moved to a better place, a worse place, or you think we're kind of just stayed the same?
Um, I would say definitely better. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just more in-person events and more places like Collecticon and hopefully other events that different creators and people are planning on, potentially doing, people like Charlie and etc. And I just think, and I think there are more people here. There are more communities. There are more thriving Discords, YouTube channels, social media stuff. I also think there's all across this country, people are going to local LGSs, meeting people, hanging out. There's all sorts of communities that are happening and existing right now, on and off the web. And I think that putting like the market and the prices aside, like if it's not just about getting the best cards, because then that's debatable because now everything is more expensive. So collecting could be a little bit more expensive. Getting the cards you want may not be as easy now, which I think has positives and negatives to it. But putting the market stuff aside, I think in my opinion, it's pretty undoubtedly better, stronger community, a lot more friendships, a lot more interest. What do you think about at least that piece of it?
So, I mean, what you said there with talking about like the social aspect, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of people would agree with that statement, especially with what we're already seeing kind of happen with Collecticon. And again, we are in our little group sometimes, our little niche of this hobby, and I think sometimes we lose sight of like more of the macro of it. But I think when you talk about like the social media impact, you have your Instagrams and Discords and Facebooks and YouTubes, and each one of those have their own little group of collectors, own little group of people, whether it's Instagram or you have a lot of our, listeners, our crossover listeners of both channels, or your Reddit groups. And I think that's all extremely valuable. But when you put that face to it and you do that in-person event, the game changes a little bit, and it's definitely, I think it brings it to a higher level, and it makes it even more enjoyable, because sometimes, you can get a little bit burnt out from this hobby, but when you're able to talk to somebody who's your friend, and more often than not, the conversation doesn't always just revolve around Pokemon. It can revolve around a lot of different things. So you could sort of, in a way, find you get like this weird calming effect in this hobby when maybe the hobby itself gets a little overwhelming. Just the relationships you've made in that hobby, help really smooth everything over pretty well. But I want to bring up something, when we talk about transition and are reflecting on 2020 to 2021, one of the things you talked about was one of the reasons you decided to create your channel and kind of do the in-depth market talks that you did when your channel was very early on, was because you were a little maybe concerned or worried seeing some of people's buying habits or purchasing habits, because you saw what the market was doing. You said, uh-oh, this might not be sustainable, because you can't have cards double overnight every night into perpetuity. Like, this is all going to come to a head eventually. And please, everybody out there, like, tread lightly. And I thought you did and I thought you did something that was extremely hard, and I would say a very small minority of the people in this hobby can do. You were able to navigate the hobby, but also preach caution in a way where you didn't say everything was going to go up and everything was going to go down. You made it very clear to people that you felt that there were some, items that were going to do really well, some items that were going to do very poorly. But I think you really went out of your way to try to express that to everybody. And when you look back on where your channel was and the reason why you created that, do you think channels like that are still necessary, or do you feel that the hobby has now moved away from that, where those type of videos maybe wouldn't be as required?
I might hesitate to use the word necessary for any of this.
Sure. And yeah,
but, but like, I definitely get your point. Like, useful or helpful would be a word. And for sure, I mean, I think market conversations, first of all, they're fun. The first reason why the vast majority of people are watching this channel, are watching my channel, are engaged in my Discord or any Discord is because it's fun and it's enjoyable. And, then there can be secondary reasons of they're trying to make money, or they're trying to, reach some sort of goals. And there can be a variety of, pleasure or that can come from that secondarily. But so I think that, is it helpful? For sure. Is every single thing helpful? Is every single moment helpful to every person? Obviously not. There are hours and hours of content, and I think oftentimes we say something that's very helpful to one person out there, or to a few people out there, or to a lot of people out there. A lot of people who consume a lot of this type of content have heard a number of the arguments before. Sometimes it's good to hear them again, but also our arguments and our ideas about the hobby are improving over time, and continuing to change and shift and adapt. And I think that for myself, and maybe for you and for a lot of people here, it's like I'm not trying to rush to anything, because I'm just trying to enjoy the experience and enjoying the collecting and the ride. And so I think that when you look at it from a long-term perspective, it's very helpful, I think, to a lot of people. All of the conversation that's being had. I there's going to be things that I say and you say and other people say that are going to be wrong or misleading, or one person's going to hear it a certain way and then they're going to make a financial decision that they might regret. Like, that's the nature of people like having conversations about topics. But I think the the majority of it is like very positive and fun, and people are, I think the vast majority of people who have watched either of our channels for any amount of time have learned and thought and engaged in it in a way that's helped them, even if they disagree with things that we say, and have learned that way through their sort of disagreement or argument or debate.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny when you say like sometimes you say stuff that's wrong, but when you have these hour-long lives, it's very easy to hear one thing and like maybe take a little bit out of context too. So if somebody doesn't listen to like the entire live or the entire video, they might, misconstrue a little bit what your point was. But the thing is too is, and when you talked about like changing too, I think that is an extremely important point to make too, because as this hobby changes, like we need to also change. I mean, fundamentals is one thing, but if you want to like live in the now and live in the day today, in the long run, like nothing beats fundamentals for the life of this hobby, but living in the day to day and doing that sort of kind of Pokemon play, you have no choice but to adapt. And sometimes you have to adapt with things that you don't agree with if that's where you see the market going. And that could be some of the hardest things for people to do. And especially me personally, there's been a lot of things that have happened in this hobby, a lot of plays that I've missed out on because I just thought they were irrational plays, but the market proved me wrong. Actually I could think of one that proved both of us wrong. Evolutions. Evolutions proved us both wrong. When it hit 700 when it hit 1,000 and then it retraced back to 700 and it's kind of stayed around that point, I'd say that I was wrong about that. And sometimes, but
Sure. I mean, I think that I also think that saying something is right or wrong often is not is often oversimplifying like something, saying that this product is going to be this price, you can say that person was right or wrong. But saying how a product is going to do in a really long-term trajectory, they may be right about some elements or some factors of it and then wrong about others. And I
yeah,
think that's often a much better way, so I mean, for evolution specifically, right, there were lots of elements that I was right about, and then there were elements that I was wrong about, so elements that I was right about were, for example, the the PSA cards tanking, when I was talking every day in every video about don't buy $1,500 PSA 9 Evolutions Charizards, don't buy 3,000 because the supply is going to come back and hit it. But I also came on my channel when that booster box was about $300, saying that, oh boy, and I remember people would come on and say, should I buy it? Should I sell it? And I said, I never, ever told anyone to sell, because I told them, and you can go back on these labs, that I can't predict the future, and that when markets move like this, they can double again. So I would say things like that product could potentially double again. Very similar thing I said at Moonbreon when it hit 700. Same sort of analysis of like, when this type of movement can happen, if the demand is enough, it can continue to drive it up. But that I don't like it. I don't like that Moonbreon at 700 still, even though the price is at what it's at. And I don't like that booster box, that Evolutions booster box at 300 or 400. Like, I'm happy with the decisions I made. I stand behind them, but I was wrong in the sense that I guess it's a good invest. I don't like to think in terms of prices as much as I like to think in terms of the fundamentals and sort of what you knew. And I think, I think that there's a lot of luck involved and the timing involved, because I think the exact same person who bought those at 700 and 300 is the same mentality that bought it at 1,500 and 1,000. Evolution's thinking it'll go to 2,000, and the Moonbreon thinking it might go to 3-4, just in sort of ignoring fundamentals
yeah,
and riding sort of hype momentum wave, which can work if you're early on and doesn't work if you're too late in the process. So it's why I, now what I was wrong about 100% is the demand for modern booster boxes. If we want to talk about something in general, like, I didn't predict, like, I predicted, and it's because I was at a time in the hobby when there was really no interest in it in that way. and booster boxes for many years didn't move up, but yet there was still a lot of value in for certain like vintage set cards were over $1,000, $2,000, like the key ones like a Crystal Charizard or a Shining Charizard in PSA 10. And at that time, the booster boxes were not moving up. There was this sort of idea in the hobby that the only thing that was investable or highly collectible was vintage, outside of maybe like X and Y full arts, because it was difficult to get them in tens, or a few cards here and there. And I came in, I think I had that mentality. And so when vintage went up hugely, I was shocked by the amount that it went up, but I thought that vintage and a lot of those cards were good sort of long-term investments because I believed in Pokemon in the long term. What I did not expect was things that had been out for 2 years or 3 years, like, put evolutions aside, and evolutions is surprising and it gets talked about a lot, but like things like Team Up, things like, boxes that went from $100 to $200 to $1,000 within a year, like those types of movements, I didn't realize that there was that type of demand or interest for that type of thing. I still personally don't get it because I don't understand how people are so connected to those items. I don't get to me, they're not rare enough to be those prices. Like I still don't understand it. But in that sense, I was wrong. I mean, at least for now, that demand is there for those types of things, and those can reach those prices. Whereas now there's plenty of vintage stuff I don't get prices and didn't get the prices, as I was talking about on my channel every day, like during the hype, and when prices were double or triple what they are now for some items. But I get I felt like the fundamentals of a sort of a long-term historic item in the hobby were there in that sort of thing. And I did not feel that way about these other items that were moving in a similar sort of percentage up. And in that way, as of now, I'm wrong, or that hasn't panned out. But fortunately for me, the vintage stuff moved up the same percentage or more. So it's sort of like it didn't end up mattering, because as long as you had your money or speculated or invested in some part of the hobby, you were fine. But it's something that I continue to have a hard time and be interested to hear your opinion, but like a hard time sort of making sense of that, making sense of how people can pay thousands of dollars for things that are just out a few years when they have no idea how many of them are made, and they have and they've only known about it for 6 months or a year or 2 years, like how they can feel a personal connection to it. It's hard for me to sort of rationally wrap my head around that. So I just don't buy it,
Yeah.
and continue to not buy it. And obviously the more expensive it gets, the less I want it, which versus the more expensive it gets, the more people want it, which is often what happens when people kind of get caught up in that FOMO, I think. But
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You talked a little bit about like more super modern stuff too. And there are these like few super modern plays that I wouldn't say like a lot of people were wrong on. I just think maybe we underestimated. A perfect example of that would be like Evolving Skies. I've never found one person who told me Evolving Skies was a bad set. I've still yet to find that person, but it gets a little bit different when you say, well, this is going to be the most expensive Sword and Shield set, and prices, even after reprints and multiple waves of this stuff, prices are going to creep up past $250, because if I were to look at the Sword and Shield block, like, and this is where my bias comes in, because I look at Brilliant Stars. I like Brilliant Stars better because it's a Charizard set. Usually people, love themselves Charizards. And it also reintroduced, the trainer gallery, very similar to like why I love Cosmic Eclipse so much. And Brilliant Stars brought that back again with Charizards. And I don't think Evolving Skies is a bad set. And I don't dislike like Evolutions at all. I love them. I think it's a great set, and I think it has fun alternative arts. But after opening Evolving Skies, not really enjoying the opening experience, because if you just look at the set list, if you get your ETB, open it up, and you look at the set list, you're like, wow, this is awesome. But everything that you're going to end up pulling really like detracts from that. So for me, I take what makes a good set to me? Something that's fun to open, something that's going to have big chase cards in it. And while Evolving Skies has big chase cards, it's not fun to open. So I thought Brilliant Stars would do better. And I mean, I was wrong there. I mean, Brilliant Stars isn't doing bad, but I just didn't think Evolving Skies was going to do as good as it is doing.
So I think the takes on modern booster boxes are mostly based on nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a bold claim out there because people don't know the supply. People have no idea how much is out there. And it is so impacted by supply. You could have a much better set, but if they print 3, 4, 5 times as much as that, as like a Rebel Clash or like a base Sun and Moon, like you can see how those can actually end up doing better or being more expensive sealed product. You can also see how irrational the whole thing is from a value, people try to say like this set has good expected value, so it should be really, the box should be really good. Evolutions had $1,500 PSA 9 holo Charizards that you could pull pretty easily. It had, at the time that it was about $800 to $900 to $1,000, that booster box. The flying Pikachus were selling for like $200 in PSA 10. Ones that you can easily pull multiple a box, the secret rares that are extremely easy to pull. All of the regular holos, had some decent value. Like, and then most of those cards have fallen 90%, like 70 to 90% in value, and the booster box has fallen 10% in value.
Yeah.
It shows you how untied and untethered sealed booster box collecting or investing or speculating is from. And what's weird about it is it makes some sense for sets that are rare sealed, because when you have a box that for sealed collectors, they want, everything sealed. And if that's one of the few sealed boxes left, we'll talk about like an E series or like Deoxys. And
Sure.
I think those boxes are probably overvalued also. So, things don't make sense for me there too. But there's at least for me, the narrative of, there are probably only, 5 to 50,000 of most of these boxes left sealed. It could be more, could be less, probably not less. But there are probably, hundreds of thousands, of Evolutions boxes sealed left or something like that. Again, yeah. we're throwing out random numbers, but I would be very comfortable saying there's way, way, way more of that sealed left than these earlier sets. And then it becomes a sort of thing of like, why does a set like that remain valuable? And to me, it's the exposure. It was all the influencers and YouTubers talking about it. It was that it was base set reprint, so it easily connected to people and people viewed it. And it was because so many people bought it and engaged in it that they all had an incentive to keep the price up and keep talking about how great it was, because all of the new collectors had money in it and then had their own incentive. So that's part of why I don't like it. It doesn't feel good to me as like something that has value, that follows market trends that I understand, that makes sense to me. So that's why a set like that I would pick on so much, or I would talk about so much. Something like Evolving Skies being at 240, and the Umbreon prices and these types of things, like it is wild. And if we compare it to what's happening with like modern Magic product, and we can, and we think about sort of the general fear in the markets and what's happening with crashing crypto and all these things going on, it is interesting. But for right now, it is what it is. There's a lot of demand. Now, is it investor speculators? Is it collectors buying and opening the boxes? And there aren't going to be that many left because people really enjoy opening it. Some combination, I have no idea. That's why I think the takes on it are sort of like shooting in the dark.
Yeah. So
like, what does one person know? What do I know from the next guy, about what that's going to do, that type of thing.
So where I struggle the most is kind of what you talked about, is those booster box prices. It's like, are people buying these to keep them as sealed pieces, or are they buying them to open them? And I always struggle with booster boxes that start exploding in price, but when the packs themselves are still like ultra readily available. Evolving Skies are extremely available packs. Like you can still go into like a lot of Walmarts and Targets and on restock days, still pick these up. They're in a ton of different collection boxes. If you want to pick up Evolving Skies packs, like just the Charizard UPC had 3 of them. These packs are still in products today. And it was the same like hang up I had with Evolutions, because Evolutions packs were in everything. And not only were they in everything, like during the end of XY, during Sun and Moon, they were in everything like during Sword and Shield too. But it even when Evolutions spiked up and booster boxes hit like 1,000 or whatever, you can still go and pick up some Sword and Shield era tins that had Evolutions packs still inside of it. So it's like, all right, something weird is going on, because these booster box prices can't be people opening up, because if that's the sense, and if they're spending $200+ to open this booster box, it's why don't you just go out and buy 36 packs loose? Because you can't weigh modern anyways. It's not like these packs are weighable. It's not like they're, it's that's where I struggle with that.
Anything, so in general, like my golden rule if I'm going to buy something is I have to understand why I think this should be worth this much. And I engage in far too many conversations with people who are just like, but it's this much and so it's good. It's like there's a very like, do you actually like it? Like I want to shake them and be like, you've known this set for 6 months. You've known that this card has been in existence for 6 to 8 months. How do you like this thing so much? And how are you so sure you're going to like it in 6 months or a year from now or 2 years from now? And how do you know that other people are going to like it? And that can be true for anything, so it's when you combine it, you're literally buying things at the worst time. It's the highest demand time. The most people are the most excited about something. Now, again, those things can double before they find a plateau,
Yeah.
my personal opinion is that these types of items are driven up by media and by people talking about them incessantly, by people hearing about them incessantly and talking about on Reddit and like everywhere having those conversations. And that attention more than anything else drives up the price. Now, what about the item gets that attention? That's the interesting conversation to me of like, is it something intrinsic, that there's just something that's captivating about it? Is it the price itself? Is it a market manipulation of certain people who, have pushed the price up and then talked about it and then gotten other, that I have no idea. That's why I just think you just have to, if it doesn't make sense to you, just take a step back. But I think why it's, I have 2 things. Like one thing, I'm one part of me is thrilled, and it's kind of terrifying, but is thrilled that people are willing to pay this type of price for a modern Pokemon card, because it just means that they like really like Pokemon, I guess. I have a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around why people like Pokemon so much to the point that they're willing to spend that much money for a card like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because again, that card is not the first appearance of Umbreon or some historic important card in the hobby. It's just hard for me to get there, but I like that they love it. And if they're buying it, if they hear this and they're like, I love it, Jake, and to me, it's easily worth that, and I don't care that there are 6,000 of them, already graded, and that there's, that it, et cetera, and I'm not buying it for the speculation or the investment. It's like, I'm just happy that there are people like that. And for me to yuck their yum, or for anyone to sort of tell them that their collecting habits or what they like is stupid is offensive. Like, I get that. But I guess it can be an agree to disagree sort of thing about, we all have different items that we look at, or different sets that we look at that we really like or we really admire. There are people who think that trophy cards that I go after are stupid and they don't understand them. And then there are other people who think that they're really get the value. So, it's a free market.
Yeah, and that's why just,
Yeah.
from what you were saying is why I think today's topic so important is just reflecting on the last few years because that's why I like phrase the question the way I did is has the hobby changed? Has it stayed the same? And in a weird way, I feel like we're still having some very similar conversations as we were in 2020, 2021, still trying to navigate this hobby in this way. You know, if you told me after we saw crazy prices with evolutions that we would now be comparing another set, which is having similar irrationality behind it, the same way I felt evolutions had with evolving skies now, it feels like this hobby is just continuously doing this like weird circle in a way where it's and I think you talked about you put it really well when you said you have to kind of pace yourself in this hobby or at least look for more in the long term of this hobby. And that's one of the things I've constantly said is this hobby is if you think like sports, this is not the 100-yard dash. This is always the marathon. And nobody ever wins a marathon by just sprinting off the starting line. Like it's a slow pace for a long time.
So I'm
And
curious, like one person in the chat, Yamamoto, just said, please reprint it. I need another case. I'm really interested in sort of why you want another case. Why do people want another case? Is it to open it because you're really jonesing to open more Evolving Skies to try and hit that card? Or is it because you think it's a really good investment and you're just hoping to get more at a lower price? And you or other people, can answer that. But that goes to this idea, like no one ever says it. Like I don't have any interactions with anyone collecting this set or any of these sets. It that doesn't start with like, do you think this is a good investment? Like, money, like, and at these prices, right? Like, I
yeah,
certainly have people doing that for 5, 10, 30, $40 cards, but for $1,000, fifteen
yeah.
hundred dollar, I'm
And,
just not.
and you're not interacting with people who are completing that set by buying a case of those cards either. So yeah, it's a good
So
question.
is it right because I really want to open more, or is it for an investment? And I would just say that, like, um Yamamoto says he'll rip it open, that he likes to open. Yeah, I mean, so if that is driving it, just the enjoyment of opening the product and chasing this sort of stuff, then that is very solid. And then a lot of it will get opened. There won't be as left sealed. And if that is really the vast majority of it, and you and I just really underestimate the amount of people out there who really want to open it and are just doing it for like the fun and the high, you know, it is what it is. It's hard for me. Like, I have no fun opening a $240 box of Evolving Skies because the odds of pulling any value are slim to none. There's probably two cards in that set that you could pull that you would make money on, that you would make your money back. And I'm someone who just, I guess, I'll just open like, $18 Korean Yu-Gi-Oh! Or like I just there's just a lot more things that provide more fun at a much cheaper level. And then I can just buy those singles. It's how I've always operated. How do you operate, PK? Like, would you enjoy opening that box knowing that you're very
I
likely to
don't
get
so
$30 out of
like
it or $25 out of it? Yeah.
yeah. So like a box here and there for modern, sure. If I really like the set and I just want to experience it and enjoy it, I would say the set that I opened the most of out of any modern product was not Evolved Skies, was Cosmic Eclipse. And at the time, I I love Cosmic Eclipse. I was opening up, Sword and Shield base timeline. I didn't like Sword and Shield base. I felt like I was an outlier, not liking, the Zashi and Zamazenta. And then during Rebel Clash, I was still opening it. And then Darkness Ablaze, I was still opening it. And then, come time of Vivid Voltage, there was no more Cosmic Eclipse to be found on the shelves anymore. So I really got my fill there. But that was the last modern set I really opened a lot of. But I really enjoyed it. uh I was very lucky. I was able to pull like my chase card in that set, which was the character Pikachu, the Reds Pikachu. And my chase card wasn't the most expensive card in that set. It was just the card that I really, really enjoyed as a card. And for modern product though, in general, like a lot of this newer stuff, like I'm not opening boxes and boxes and cases of cases. Really, it's like a pack here or there. And one of the things too is maybe this is a blessing, maybe this is a curse. I don't know. Maybe the chat could decide, but I'm very content with just putting in like a booster box opening in the background and just kind of listening or watching. Like I'll watch a PokeRev stream, whether he's open in Silver Tempest or whether he's open in Lost Origins, and watch him just get absolutely wrecked. Well, he's not really getting wrecked. Like he's doing fine, but you know what I'm saying? Like pull rate wise, getting wrecked. And sometimes that's just enough for me for modern, being like, I don't want to do this. I don't want this to be me. So maybe
Yeah.
that's lucky too, that I could be content enough to just watch other people open product, but I'm still buying modern product and putting it away, keeping it sealed for like personal goals, but they're very different. Like we're talking like 1, 2, 3 booster boxes, depending. Sometimes we're not talking multiple cases.
Yeah, and then how many people like in the chat or elsewhere were opening the box at 90 and having fun at that, or 120, but are you still enjoying at 240? See, that's really what I'm getting at. This type of thing too. Because it's like for me at 90, 95, even 120, if I like am having a nice occasion, or a friend is over or something, I would definitely be willing to open that.
Yeah, no,
But
that's a fantastic point. I just said I loved opening Cosmic Eclipse. I loved opening Cosmic Eclipse between like 90 and 130. I did not, I am not opening Cosmic Eclipse at whatever it's selling at now, like $450. Like that stops being fun. So that's also a good point, is when does opening a product, when does that enjoyability factor go away a little bit when prices start to get a little bit too high? And
I worry, like, if I'm being completely honest, like I worry about the addiction, and I worry like, is this, it's like if you're cracking 240, $260,000, I mean, people in sports are cracking $4,000, $5,000,
yeah,
products. I mean, it's
on a
way more intense
Tuesday, yeah,
there.
like a
Yeah,
random day.
exactly. It's way more intense there. Like people are getting divorced left and right in sports because of card addiction, no joke. Because people are, crack open these $4,000 or $5,000 packs, hoping to hit $100,000 pack and then hit $50 or, $100, $200 worth of cards. But, it's not that extreme for this stuff, but it does, that doesn't feel healthy or good for anyone. I think that's why it's sort of like, I guess it's also can be, I just think like good modern sets being in sort of like a $90 to $120 range for a while, for the lifespan where everyone who's sort of in the hobby and engaged can like open it at those prices and enjoy it would be like a good thing. Going back to your initial question of like what is the hobby in a better or worse place? Like I think that is a healthier thing for everyone, because people are losing less money, there's less stonking, and there's less of that dopamine addiction sort of high, maybe, and it's a more healthy range. I mean, when I was opening a lot of modern during Sun and Moon and towards the end of XY, I was getting those boxes at $80, $90, and I was pulling cards that were worth $60, $50, $60, and that was like really fun, really worth it. If I'm pulling $30, $40 cards from $240 boxes, or if I'm opening a team up box and I pull $150 worth of cards out of $1,000 box, like, I mean, but then I see, and again, guys, I'm the same way with vintage stuff. This is not an attack on modern, in the sense of like when people are opening up these vintage booster boxes or packs or these types of things, like I just don't get it. I don't get how people can open this stuff up and just lose thousands and thousands of dollars, when they could just buy the card outright, like sell the pack, buy the card outright. And I guess that people just love the gamble, people love the experience, and I don't. And so it just comes down to that at the end of the day. And if I am in the minority on this stuff, then I'm going to be wrong from an investor perspective, and my instincts, because I don't see the value, are wrong because the market sees the value, and that's fine. don't listen to me, basically. Do what
Yeah.
makes sense to you.
Well, it's funny because I think sometimes we struggle too with the fact of just how incredibly tough modern is to just open and complete sets. Like, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but today, at the time of recording this video, PokeRev did Heart Gold Soul Silver base set booster box opening. So Heart Gold Soul Silver has, I believe, 6 primes. It has like I don't know if I can name them all, but like the Feraligatr, the Domphane, the Meganium, the Chanseys in there, and then there's like 2 other. I can't really think of the other 2, but he pulled 5 of the 6 primes in that booster box, and then there's 2 legend cards. So technically, it's like 4 legend cards because you have the top half and you have the bottom half. You have the Lugia and the Ho-Ho. He pulled all 4 of those legends cards. He pulled the top of the Ho-Ho, bottom of the Ho-Ho, top of the Lugia, bottom of the Lugia. Then there's 2 secret rares in that set. One of them's a Gyarados, but then the other one, I just call it the one. Like that's a number of the set. It looks like an unknown ancient text, but I just call it the one because that's how it's like ONE. That's how it's labeled in the set. That's how I remember it. And he also pulled that one secret rare. So he got 5 out of the 6 primes, 4 legend cards, and one of the 2 secret rares in one booster box. That is a very accomplishable task if somebody wanted to say open a couple packs or a couple packs over a wide spread of time in order to complete Heart Gold Silver base, because we just saw how easy the pull rates are. Now, can you do that for modern? Can you pull all but one of the secret rares and then all but one of the alternative arts and then all 4? You just can't do it. Like there's no comparison to what he did with that Heart Gold Soul Silver booster box opposed to anything today modern. Literally, he pulled 5 of 6 primes, all 4 legend cards, and one of the 2 secret rares. One booster box. That's a great booster box, don't get me wrong, but it's
Yeah. And I think that we just don't have the numbers to work with this stuff. If we had a print run estimation of how much Evolving Skies there was versus other things, it would give us some starting point to the conversation. And that's why this conversation, goes in circles for everyone. And some people are sort of agree with me and have sort of my perspective and my take. And then some people have more of a take of like, this is something closer to like, this is a historic greatest set of all time, going to be for a while. It's extremely fun and enjoyable to open at 240, and the majority of the hobby feels that way and will continue to feel that way, and it will continue to push the price up. And I don't necessarily think you're wrong. I mean, I really don't know. Like, I wouldn't know how to start going about having a math, trying to figure that out with any sort of numbers. It's very opinion based. It's very about how you feel personally, and you should do what makes sense to you. As long as you understand the basic supply and demand principles and that supply and demand matters. Now, the people who say supply and demand doesn't matter, or just say demand matters and don't understand, 101 economics, like, that's a little more worrisome. But I think there are plenty of people out there who do, and they simply think that Pokemon is going to continue to go on a tear. The amount that they print, when I compare it to Marvel and Star Wars and Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh and so many other things, Pokemon is a juggernaut. And the fact that they can print this much and sell it at those prices, this short after release, and then have this many new sets coming out, just continues to prove that. And I do think, to my market manipulation point, it can be very easy when you don't understand something to like be like, oh, it's got to be market manipulation, when it really isn't. When it's just collectors and enjoyment, and people, or even putting collectors aside, gamblers. It's people. There's just a lot of people who love opening and ripping Pokemon and gambling, and it's enough that it just wipes out the supply and pushes the prices up. And now, if you want to look at evolutions, what happened to evolutions? The singles tanked. Undeniable, right? The supply now and the sealed, and it's why I've always said that if you're going to invest in some of this stuff, I would way prefer the sealed, because at least with sealed, the booster boxes are being constantly open, so there's less and less out there. And if what's really driving this is the fun of opening, that people are willing to pay these high prices, they only want it sealed. They don't want the graded card. They don't want the card already. So just you know, that's where I would be on it. And it is why at $95 I bought a number of cases of Evolving Skies at 95. I did not at 160, because I did not think it would go to 240, or I did not feel comfortable. I mean,
Yeah.
put it that way, you know, buying more at that price. And I never will. Like, I'll never buy another box of that, probably, you know, unless the market establishes that price point for a really long time. And then I feel like the set is now more vintage. I feel like it's held these prices for, and I'm talking 10 years, you know,
Yeah.
15 years maybe. Then I would consider, you know, buying it and adding it to my collection if I felt like I didn't have enough in my collection, or wanted to fill a gap. Because for me, I'm not in a rush.
Yeah, especially a set like that. Like, you had your opportunity for, if you wanted it, there was entry points to that way above to where it is today. But no, you had talked about other card games, and one of the card games you had, quickly just mentioned was Magic the Gathering. And we're seeing all the crazy headlines that are happening with Magic the Gathering. And I think Bank of America, Rudy's been pumping out videos about this left and right. But, Bank of America talked about how potentially Magic the Gathering's really getting hurt because they were looking at more just the short-term money of it, pumping out a bunch of stuff and making quick cash, and wasn't really considering like the longevity of the game, or maybe even really the conversation which got brought up a lot was the secondary market prices. Like, if people buy your product, it can't just go to zero. Like, people aren't going to want to keep buying it if every time they buy it, everything goes to zero and everything's printed out. And, I think Rudy ended one of his videos where he's like, everybody out there who wanted every single card Magic printed to be worth 3 cents, congratulations, you won. Pretty much like, go screw yourselves, because you're going to end up killing this game. And I think a lot of the articles have gone pretty hard against Magic the Gathering. But I want to at least propose this question to you. Is it a potential that Pokemon would have done the exact same thing, and maybe they just didn't have the ability? Because Pokemon went out there and said, we are printed to our max capabilities. And maybe it just happened to be that their max capabilities was still not enough. But what if hypothetically their max capabilities was enough? Could Pokemon have just done the exact same thing? If they could have, they would have, type scenario. They just weren't able to.
I mean, you can say the same thing about grading cards, right? And that if PSA had been able to grade more in that window, it might have tanked prices even harder than it already has, because so many people haven't been able to send in a lot of cards. So many cards are now $40, $20, $30, $10 that were $100, $150, and now people aren't sending those in anymore, so the prices aren't tanking anymore, etc. There's going to hold some premium there. So sure, I mean, everything is supply and demand. If Pokemon had printed a lot more, had the capacity to print a lot more, decided to print a lot more, it would have had a negative impact. It's why I don't, when people say, and Rudy had a video saying basically that all of the printing that Pokemon doesn't matter. And you can take that one of two ways. One way you can take that is that it won't matter because they're not going to be able to print enough because demand is so high, that it matters in the sense that the more printed, the lower the price will be, but the price will still be really good because even though they printed a lot, there's still going to be so much demand. I think that's a very reasonable argument. I saw other people come out with this just nonsense idea that like supply doesn't matter in the world of economics. And I really like, people are going to say this until they get horribly burned by supply. And this is something that like people just believe this until they get crushed, and they'll get crushed by something, in some market, that there is a number for anything, that if there is that you could have the most in-demand thing in the world. You could have something that every human on the planet wanted 2 or 3 of at $1,000, right? You could have, at $10,000, $100,000, whatever. And if you printed 100 billion or 200 billion or made, it would completely crash that market. And so you're putting a lot of trust or faith in Pokemon to maybe thread that needle to care about the secondary market and to not reprint down the secondary market, which is something that they could do. And if you're comfortable doing that, that's fine. And if you're comfortable that the demand is gonna stay where it is and continue to grow, all the power to you. I'm certainly not rooting against that. That's for sure. I just am uncomfortable with it from a betting standpoint.
No, definitely. And there's nothing, I would say that Pokemon is definitely doing some positioning right now, and none of the positioning Pokemon is doing screams from the top of the rooftops, we're going to be printing less. Like, they're literally positioning themselves in a position where they bought Millennium Print Group. They seem like they are positioning themselves to print a ton of this stuff. And I think we could already look at a super modern product that we were speculating out our asses of what the Charizard UPC print runs would look like. No one really knew because, I mean, it makes sense. A lot of people was just constantly going back and comparing them to celebrations because UPC, different products, like when you break them down to what the contents is, metal cards versus non-metal cards, what's easier to print and this is just what we do. We do a lot of the speculation, but they're conversations people want to have. So it's the conversations we're going to have. But Pokemon really proved that no, we can print a ton of these things if we wanted. I remember everybody like crying about how GameStop was taking unlimited pre-orders, and then next thing you know, Walmart, the biggest big box retailer in the entire country, was doing limits of 10, 10. Like the numbers, the logistical numbers behind these things were ridiculous. So Pokemon has proved that they can ramp up, and maybe they're starting to just say, none of this stuff's going to be rare anymore. It's going to be there if you want it. Or they're starting to identify like the good products beforehand. Maybe they have somebody in their corporate office or whoever is like, listen, this product will sell a lot. We need to print way more of these than we do anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, we can speculate a bunch of narratives, right? I mean, why did they reprint Darkness Ablaze booster boxes to the ground? Those were selling at 120, 140. They printed them back down. They're still at $35 right now. A set that nobody wanted, that was popular when it first came out because it had the VMAX Charizard, and then when the Rainbow Rare Charizard version of that, and then Alt Arts became popular, no one is interested in that set. No one wants it. There's not a single card from that set that the majority of people want, right? Reprinted it. Vivid Voltage, why did that get a big reprint? Why did they push the price from $200 down? Now they may have said that we could come up with a number of theories why those things happened, and those are two examples where reprints did really push the price down. Hidden Fates got pushed pretty heavy. Shining Fates got destroyed, right, by the amount that they printed, showing that sometimes Pokemon seems to get it right, sometimes they get it wrong, but also what is right or wrong from Pokemon's perspective. Maybe Shining Fates is right and Evolving Skies is wrong from their perspective because they prefer, maybe they've made more money. They think at 240, they're leaving a lot on the table for Evolving Skies and they're going to plan to reprint it. Everyone's opinion, like, it's great to share our opinions, but none of us know what the hell.
None of us know. No.
So across the board. And if you have anyone yelling at you and being rude to you, like, they know, they have an idea, they're full of it. So nobody knows. I mean, another narrative is that they don't have that much control and that these decisions are made a long time in advance, are put in, and then they just sort of have to go through with it because it requires a lot of money and time to organize it and to set it up with the printers. Now, maybe now that they, have more control of their printing, maybe they're changing the dynamic. Maybe they'll be able to have their finger on the pulse now and do a better job. But what does better mean? Does better mean 240 boxes? Does better mean caring about the secondary market, investor speculator? Or does better mean trying to keep it as long as possible at 90 so they can sell the most product possible at that price? Because they're not making any more money at the boxes at 240. They're still selling it, to the distributors. And so they just want to sell as much as possible. They're not looking to, they're not making money off of printing too little. The only way they might be making money is by keeping the investors or the speculators happy, and the LGS is happy because they're making really good margins, which makes them buy more, which keeps everyone more interested, which eventually leads to them to be able to then print more and sell more. Sort of what's happening in Magic, where they've gone the opposite, and they've sort of money, as they've argued. I don't know how true this is, but certainly Rudy is pounding this drum, and that they're money grabbing, and that all the moves they've made have been huge money grabs, and they've tried to push products up, and they're doing direct to consumer selling to try to make that money, and that is hurting the long term player enjoyment of the hobby, and pushing people to Commander, et cetera, rather than opening and engaging and playing the new sets. It's there's just so many moving pieces there. You and I can come up with a lot of smart theories and narratives that are interesting, but I just think that they're just sort of theories.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is when we do our theories and everything, I think a lot of people look to the people that maybe came into the hobby a little bit more recently, they look back to what they know. Is they're going to look back at like the last 4 sets of Sun and Moon. They're going to look back at your team ups or your Unified Minds, Unbroken Bonds, Cosmic Eclipse, like those 4 sets, and they're going to go, well, they never got big reprints. But that all those sets were immediately right before like the shutdowns in March of 2020 and printers shutting off and all that stuff. Like, who knows what sort of effect the printer shutting down had on the reprints of a Cosmic Eclipse or a Team Up. Maybe all those were in the works, but we don't know. Yep. We just speculate. We don't know. So now, as printers are going full burr mode on like crazy, maybe now like reprints will just happen more and more. But then it's like you said, why did Pokemon decide to reprint Darkness Ablaze? If they really have their finger on the pulse of the market, was that a set that really needs it? So we'll speculate. We'll say they're probably not going to reprint Battle Styles. They're probably not going to reprint Chill and Rain because we're looking at secondary market prices. But maybe Pokemon doesn't care. Maybe, it's a lot of speculation. But I think the Magic conversations is an important conversation to have, because it's like a double-edged sword too. I went right before this video started. I was just curious, like, what are those Magic 30th anniversary packs selling for? One of the things that they're quoting in these articles saying like that these 30th anniversary products hurt the longevity of Magic. But then when I went on eBay, people are buying these things for close to double MSRP. And I'm like, wait a second. If Magic the Gathering sold out of these things, how is that hurting them? Because the secondary market's mad, but that doesn't affect their balance sheets immediately. You literally made $1,000 product and it sold out instantly. I struggle with that too,
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. It's like, okay, if you're selling out of this product, how is this hurting you by doing this? But then that's just one very small product. But then you look at like all of Magic's products and everything they're making, it's like, well, not everything is selling out. Like,
and the idea is that some of those premium products are hurting the lesser products potentially, or that maybe they're just printing too much of everything, like too much specialty, too much regular, Rudy is very strong on printing less, and that all, so that prices on the secondary market remain higher. And I think from his business perspective, it's not great when there's a lot of losers and then an occasional winner.
Yeah.
So like when a lot of sets don't sell for him, like he's sitting on a ton of Magic, and again, he through his Patreon subscription like can probably still move it and still make money like better than like any other person. Like I'd be shocked if there's anyone out there who had a better model of selling Magic or selling product in general and making automatic money than Rudy has come up with. It's amazing. It's brilliant. I mean, it's
even his promos he sold too.
Sorry.
The promos he sold, his Rudy promos, like did he make like $1 million or something? Somebody did the math. It worked out to be like $1 million on one of his promos he made.
Sure. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. And I mean, people pay a subscription membership to be a part of the Discord, part of the Patreon, which then makes people more want to buy the product because they're already paying to get in to get access to the product. So now why not buy the product, et cetera, et cetera. So people actually pay higher prices than on eBay sometimes for Rudy's product. And there's a lot of stuff in that. That being said, I think it's really hard. I think Rudy would probably love to sell as cheaply as possible to his patrons. And I don't think Rudy's evil or is trying to manipulate or take advantage of people. I also think he's smart psychologically. He understands what motivates people and what moves people and tries to make it a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think part of what's frustrating right now is it can't really be a win-win for everyone. It's honestly, Rudy is not winning as much and the patrons are just losing, if I'm being completely blunt, financially. Now, I'm a patron of his because I really love Rudy and I just like what he's done for the card community. So I don't need to ever buy product from him, and I'll be a patron and just give him the $15 a month because I like, and I don't care that he's super rich and, the stuff is, I really, and all the content he puts out, like I'm just a supporter of his and I'm happy to do that. But like, from a financial perspective, it is not a good deal. like in this market. Now, in a really hot bull market when all these products are doing really well, particularly because he pays like taxes and does other sort of things for you, the model works. But now that Magic's raised the prices, now that PayPal and UPS has raised their prices, like the margins just aren't there. So the business is just not working like it used to. And it's stressful for him. That's part of where I'm sure his complaints and frustrations coming from, because he's built this amazing thing and he does really care, I think, about his patrons. And so I'm talking about him, but I think that is affecting every LGS out there who's involved in this stuff. And what they're getting dead Magic product that isn't moving, that isn't selling. They're getting complaints. They're getting people who aren't playing the modern sets and are moving to like Commander format. Like there's just a lot of that happening. Now, is it going to kill Magic? I think that, all right, let's pump the brakes a little bit there, with that sort of stuff. As Rudy says, which I think has some truth, it's when people stop caring at all that something's really dead. When people are still really heated and negative and there's still a lot of intensity, there's still a chance to sort of right the ship and make it work for everyone. But if people get fed up with the toxicity and the high prices and then just leave and stop talking about it, that's when something like that I think is dead or dying. But I've always been in the corner of like, Magic is just a much smaller IP. It's a much smaller thing than Pokemon had way more collector upside, continues to have way more in terms of prices and investability and collectability. And it's just a much bigger, broader, more popular IP and will likely always be. Obviously, Magic is like trying to partner with very popular IPs to try and, that's one thing that they're trying to do. We'll see how all of that works.
Yeah. And I think when Rudy talks about like print runs and stuff, keeping, print runs low, I think one of the things he probably is talking about too is, especially when you look at like the $1,000 Magic price or the 30th anniversary, sure, they might have sold out, but just because they sold out, if the trickle down effect is you have a lot of people leave Magic, and I think that's Rudy's seen that happen with other card games where as prices start to crash, people start to exit out. And like, for me, I've already kind of made my stance on MetaZoo clear, but I feel like one of the dangers for MetaZoo or any sort of new game is if you have a lot of people that were actively engaged in that game start to, leave. It is much easier to keep people in the hobby than to have people leave and have them come back, because when you're keeping people in the hobby, then you can have a couple people joining here and there, So you have your core group, but then you have people continuously pile in. That's one of the beautiful things about Pokemon that people don't talk about enough. One of the things that made Pokemon so hyper successful was because the core group of collectors were already here. So when everything went crazy, the core group was just like, come on in, everybody, the water's warm, And so that group was already there, where if you have like a ton of people flooded out, you can't just have them flood out and then flood right back in. It doesn't work like that. It's not a revolving door in that sense. So when everybody mass exits, that's going to hurt the longevity of a game. And then you can really see prices start to stagnate super, super long term. So any thoughts on that? Or
Yeah, I think that one big conversation to kind of take that and and talk about Pokemon, right, was like how sticky are all of these new collectors and players or people who are enjoying the hobby going to be, right? And I think that's a constant question of sort of an interesting conversation of what keeps people interested. How do you find that balance of like, it's fun, it's engaging, maybe there's a little bit of drama, there's a little bit of this or that and interest without it becoming toxic, to the point where it's like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this anymore. People are talking about like MetaZoo in the chat, what happened with like the unbanning. I'm not sure if you followed.
wait, what happened?
So one complaint that I've heard from people was that they liked MetaZoo, but they didn't like the fact that anyone who said anything negative or critical about MetaZoo got banned. That was
Oh,
their
okay.
framing of it from the Discord. And I'm sure there were some people in the
I
Discord who said ludicrous things who got banned and were just really just overly negative and rude. And then there were probably some people who like, and I know there were some people because I'm friends with some who were trying to be helpful or say some sort of like helpful thing or just are fiery humans who have like very strong opinions but care about
yeah.
what you're saying. And it was a very light ban hammer, I think. And so this is an example of, right, I think that for a while that caused a lot of outrage and in some sense actually helped MetaZoo with that engagement and that fuel. But I think over time, people were just sort of like, I'm done. I don't even care. I don't even care enough to be angry anymore. I just don't want to be a part of this. I'm not interested in it. And I think that is that dying point, for anything now, for those people, not for the MetaZoo as a whole or for Pokemon or Magic as a whole, because there's lots of people who are not in that category. But I think that there are people who could be people who lifelong is a pretty strong thing to say, but at least could collect or engage in something for years in a very enthusiastic way, who have an experience like that, who maybe get so turned off.
Yeah.
In Pokemon, that might have looked like influencers telling them to buy things in way overconfident ways at extremely high prices at the top. It could have looked at just people, getting addicted on pack breaking and losing lots of money, and it can look like a lot of the scam conversation, a lot of the sort of negative conversation around everything is a scam and everyone's evil and all investors are evil and all players are it can look like a lot of things. And so I think that's why that sort of talk, when we're doing it in wherever it is, should be done carefully, because people can really have a bad experience and be turned off. I mean, I've had negative interactions with some people in this hobby where I go back and I say, yeah, I mean, I think that they were absolutely absurdly rude to me, but maybe me pushing back or fighting back or being strong back at them has pushed them out of the hobby. Whereas if I had been a little bit, if I had been very kind and patient and took some of the abuse and, maybe they would and maybe that isn't true. Maybe they're all still here and whatever. But those types of things, particularly when you're even a small content creators like us, or when you're, a lot larger, like those things matter, right? The way people are treated, both us treating each other, the content creator responsibility, and then also the company, Pokemon, MTG, MetaZoo, like their responsibility and how they treat their collectors and the decisions they sort of make.
Yeah. No, and one of the things you were talking about too just then is when you were saying, like the MetaZoo Discord group is sometimes people are vocal because you care about something so much, but when the community goes away and you care about something, you're literally just yelling at a wall at that point. If there's nobody to yell at anymore, that alone makes you want to drive out. And I think like one of the things I talked about earlier, and you talked about this, and it's that Pokemon community. Like there's legit a community, and I don't care what anybody says. Like this community is super strong, super engaging. And one of the things I find after talking to people and asking them, like, well, what do you really like about Pokemon? They talk about the artwork, they talk about the cards, but almost in the same breath, 100% of the time, they talk about the community. They like just being engaged with Pokemon, whether it's these chats or Discord groups or Instagram groups or whatever. Like they just like being involved in that community. But man, if that community goes away, that's not going to help the longevity of something. And yeah, I see a lot of people talking about just MetaZoo and Rudy and stuff like that. So
I
it's
mean, it's part of why, I'm trying to do my part in creating more live events, in going to live events and encouraging other people to go to live events. And so many other people are doing the same thing, like for Denver, you were there, like we had a bunch of people from all of our different audiences and different people that we've met. And they invited other people, right? It's like that sort of impact and effect and like that sort of thing, like those experiences, if things are not tended to and people don't work hard and commit and engage, like don't take things for granted is
yeah,
I guess what I'm getting at. Like you can easily take that stuff for granted and take people for granted. Like I was very thankful for everyone who like showed up and paid to come, and and then I was thankful for Swami and Mason and you and so many people who helped bring people and who talked with people and cared about people, and the live you did there that was really cool. Like there's just lots of things that like appreciate people's effort in making these things happen, because if people don't make that effort, they won't happen. Like these things are not in stone. And I think looking at the downside and always complaining and worrying about the money and the risk, you can miss out on that sort of thing. And so I think that there's got to be a balance there.
yeah. And I want to scroll up because somebody put something. I think they said something along the lines of they don't want to dislike Rudy, like to give them a reason to like Rudy. And that's the thing. I think there's a million reasons to like Rudy because I think one of the reasons Rudy was so hyper successful with his YouTube channel in the Magic the Gathering space the way he was, and especially doing it more, not really on the playability, because that's what a Magic the Gathering channel usually was, like really hitting hard with the playability and stuff. And he did it from the investability aspect of it because he just brought himself to that channel. And sometimes you're going to like a person's personality or you're not. And if you want somebody to just be true, and that's going to be what Rudy is. Rudy's just going to throw it all at you and pile it on, and he's going to do his jokes, and he's going to have his personality and his wit to it and all that. He is still a persona, and in a way he's playing a character,
For
but
sure. He's definitely a performer.
he's a performer, but he does it in a way that's entertaining, but he's also like sharing his knowledge and sharing his experiences. But if you listen to him, and if you've listened to enough of his stuff, like he really cares about this stuff. And so for him to say he just wants a reason to like Rudy, to watch somebody who really cares about something enough the way Rudy does care about stuff, that should be enough for you to like the guy.
Sure.
Because anytime you see like enough passion from somebody, or somebody who truly to their core of cores inside themselves loves something and has such a passion for it, like that's a reason to like Rudy. And then to see how Rudy wants to see other stuff grow too, and Rudy, if he could have it his way, would have Magic be the biggest IP in the world, and for it to crush Pokemon, crush everybody under its wake, because he's that passionate about that. So if anybody wants a reason, like that's a reason. Now, whether you agree with his takes, that's separate, but you can like a guy because of passion.
So I think the biggest, most gray area for Rudy for me is the fact that he is constantly pumping the exact stuff that he is selling to people. And Now,
That's
he's also keeping it, a lot of it, and
yeah,
investing in it himself. So I actually don't think it's that much of a problem, but I get why people are. It's a little grayish
sure, it's
in
dicey. He would
places.
probably tell you it's dicey. He
Yeah,
wouldn't shy
and
from that.
he's also making so much money that
Yeah,
like I get like if you're gonna do that, you have to understand, and I think he definitely does, like why
yeah,
so many people react that sort of way. Now, I don't think he's pumping things that he think are terrible things and then just selling them and not
no,
keeping any for himself. So it's not so bad. It would be like it'd be like me, buying a bunch of a stock. I don't think you guys need this analogy. I think everyone understands it.
yeah,
But like me buying a bunch of a stock and then me saying this is an amazing stock, and then me selling half of that stock to the people I told
yeah.
were amazing to like get a little bit of liquidity back, and now we're all sort of like invested in it. In the end of the day, hopefully it's sort of a win-win for everyone, because Rudy is by far the biggest winner, 100%, because he's
Yeah.
making money off the Patreon. He's making money. He's making he's getting, because he can sell so much. I'm sure the deals he's getting, like the prices that he's able to buy things at, are allowing him to like make profit right away, are allowing a lot of mitigating a lot of downside risk, whereas people who are buying the boxes from him are at a much riskier position, are mostly hoarding it and not flipping it for profit right away, and are like, it's just, and I've never heard Rudy say that or acknowledge that.
I
And that is the one part, the fact that he doesn't, like, I don't know how he could, or maybe that'd be so detrimental to his business. I've always wanted to talk with him and do a live or have a conversation and ask him that specifically, to see how he would respond.
I think he's hyper aware of a lot of this stuff,
Yeah.
but I think he's trying to skirt that line. I mean, he's also so hyper aware that he's titled his videos, I'm pretty sure, Rudy manipulates MetaZoo, or Rudy pumps MetaZoo, or Rudy, like those are the titles of his videos because he understands the backlash. But it's a gray area too. It's how do you continue to grow his business and run his business when your business is based off of TCG? It's not just Magic, it's not just Pokemon. It is his business is MetaZoo. It is Flesh and Blood. It is Weiss. It is these other card games too. So what should he do? Should he not make a video about MetaZoo? Should he not make a video about Flesh and Blood? Like, why? Because he might manipulate the price, or it's, you know,
It's always this argument too, and I think like he could be in slightly dicey territory if cards were ever considered securities, with some of the stuff that he talks about and the way he talks about it and what he does. But because cards are not securities, technically he's not giving financial advice of the exact things that he's selling to people. Um, but I think it's a little dicey. Like I kind of go back and forth on it. But at the end of the day, if you hate him and you hate that sort of thing, it's just like, I don't want to hate. Like, I'd rather just enjoy him. He's got a hilarious personality. I support him. I'm not buying massively from him. I can get better deals for the most part elsewhere. And, and I don't think, and this is cardboard, it's not food that he's doing this with. So, uh, so um, that's sort of where I guess I'm at in the moment. And I'm just always going to be, I think a fan of his. I mean, I've had criticisms of Pokemon content creators too, and I'm still appreciative of them and fans of them, for what they've done. So I think that it's okay to have, you don't have to like every aspect of everyone's personality. In fact, if you do, you probably don't know them well enough,
I,
because
I was just gonna
yeah.
say, if you don't have any criticisms for anybody, you're not listening well enough. Like,
Yeah, or you just don't know that. It's very easy to pedestal someone when you don't know them, and
yeah,
when you just see that they have like $20 million of cards and they're very charismatic on camera. I'm sure that there Rudy has issues, and and things but I think it's also really important, just as it's important not to pedestal people, it's important not to, you know, just say people are worthless and knock them and not appreciate them. I mean, for what they are, and for the success they've had. And obviously the internet too often, I
yeah.
see very binary opinions on everything.
Basic Trainer had the quote of the night. He said, "Real friends buy your bags."
Real friends buy your bags.
So, uh, but no, I think this was a good conversation. Do you want to open it up? Maybe do like 15 minutes, open up the chat. So, chat, if any of you guys have any questions that you want answered, now's your time. Just either at you can either at Jake or at me and ask your question, and we'll be answering questions for probably about the next 15 minutes or so.
Sure.
But
Look at chat here.
yeah, no, I think it was a good conversation, like to try to reflect a little bit. And I think all in all, I think Pokemon, like if I'm gonna do my Jerry Springer like final thoughts on the at least the topic of tonight is I think Pokemon is in a better place. But I think the problem is the hobby is so diverse from the people that are actually the collectors and investors and the engagement. I think that's what it boils down to. It boils down to people's engagement. So if you really are like ripping apart everybody's engagement and really looking at it at such a micro scale for all these different groups of people, it'll be tough. I don't know.
So someone asked me about my Patreon, and about, my feeling, like, why do I have the Discord be private? Like, why can't I make at least that public and only charge for the other pieces? And something like, is it, I think they said, is it gatekeeping, these types of things to do that? And, my opinion on it is simply that, Dan and I put a lot of work into it. We have lots of experience in this hobby. We have a lot of knowledge and have had a lot of success in reaching collection goals or business goals. Yeah, and we put a lot of time and effort into the content that we have there, into the office hours every week where we talk individually with people or in groups of people. And then our once a month thing. And I feel that $10 a month, we're splitting it, and with Patreon is a fair price, for the service. And I had this talk with someone recently, like, you do not need to sign up for that to be friends with me or to like hang out with me. I am very accessible. Like, you can reach out to me. I'm in other Discords. Like, I'm in Professor Oak's Discord. Like, you can talk to me there and hang out there. I'm in Squeak's Discord. Like, and I am going to lots of conventions, and I'm working to hopefully put a convention on of my own, which is, none of this stuff is going to be, you have to be part of the Discord or something, this or that. We intentionally made like the Denver Collecticon planning thing, like, not private in my Discord, even though like the majority of people who went were in my Discord. Like, there's a lot of efforts that I make that, and please do not feel pressured or like, only do it if you want to support Dan and I, if you think it's worth it, and you want that additional office hour content and that additional, 3-hour live where you can actually talk with us a month, and where we do presentations that take us many, many hours to do, and come up with. So that's what I would say. So, I think and my goal of making it, affordable and at that price is so that it's comfortable in my mind, hopefully for everyone who would find use in that to be able to afford $10 a month. Because if you're spending hundreds and thousands on Pokemon, that maybe that I would, it would very much pay for itself. And then also sort of the entertainment and the engagement and the amount of time people spend on that for $10 a month, I think is, for people who want that, is a reasonable deal. So that's what I would say. But never anyone feel pressure to sign up for that and that I'm going to treat you differently or that we can't be friends. I mean, PK is like one of my close friends in the hobby, and he's not like,
I'm not in the Discord,
and I have zero like need or pressure for him or for anyone to do it. Like, it's not, I don't view it that way at all. So please, if you're not in it, still come up to me and hang out and talk. And I'm not going to be favoriting. The only favoriting that happens is that they get the things that I'm promising them, which is that specific office hour time, the specific conversations, private conversations that happen in Discord, and that specific Zoom live. So that's it.
Yeah. No, what you're saying is I don't think anybody in this hobby is unreachable. Like you could reach anybody if you really want it. Like people are out there.
Yeah.
Uh,
I,
but
I
yeah,
I think there'd be more of a claim to that if I was like a dick to everyone who was not in there, and I was constantly sort of like greedy and money grubbing, and everything I was doing was to
yeah,
constantly make money. And I think after 2.5 years of tons of content on YouTube, I was making videos before almost anyone, in the space. Like, anyone who's truly following and watching, and I think is, understands that I've put a ton of free effort and energy to just sort of help and connect and socialize with people that hopefully they can
Mm.
understand why I have this other thing too that you don't have to sign up for with Dan. As
Yeah.
a partner.
So Mert said, what do you guys think about V-Star Universe? Like I don't I've already like touched on V-Star Universe and other lives. If there's anything you want to add, or like it's anything you want to talk about for V-Star Universe, or
Oh, V-Star Universe, sorry.
I don't really have I've already made my take out there. It's a Japanese specialty set, a lot of reprints, beautiful cards. It's gonna go crazy. It's already pre-selling for a lot of money. Japanese markets, that's what the current hot thing is.
Oh man.
That's it.
The Japanese market's on fire. It's been interesting to see too, like what people have been grading, and some of the most graded cards have been Japanese, full art trainers and other sorts of things. Over the
Yeah.
last couple of months, it's
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 a scary market. People don't talk about how scary it is. Everyone talks about the Japanese markets like it's a slam dunk. Like people don't really talk enough about like buy list prices from these Japanese LGSs. People
yeah,
don't talk about how much is actually available in Japan. Do you know? I don't know. Most of the people buying this stuff in the US don't know. They're all acquiring this stuff through people acquiring it through people from Japan, like
yeah,
that's one. It's hard enough for me to speculate on how much English product there is in America, and I live here. Now I can't. How would I even begin to speculate on how much of this Japanese product exists in Japan? So it scares me. It's a scary thing. Like
yeah. I think it's a very similar conversation to the one we had earlier. I have a lot of the same sorts of feelings and concerns. Um, but it's also exciting and it's great. And I'm glad that people are loving this stuff and exploring new things, and that, new things are jumping up in price. It's interesting. Do I understand it? Absolutely not. But it's not for me. Waifus are not for me. Like at those prices, like I don't get it as a collector, but like I don't need to. And there are other people who love. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't understand why I would enjoy Pokemon cards at all, right? So like it's a so that could be an argument levied at every single human here, every single person here. That like, why do we enjoy the stuff we enjoy? Because we like it.
yeah. Some people said we don't know or nobody knows Japanese print runs. We just YOLO. So I feel like that is what a lot of people do. Uh,
Um,
so I think his name is Joseph said, what are y'all most excited about for the upcoming year? Or what do you hope Pokemon does? Ooh, that's a good question. So me personally, I'm very excited about Scarlet and Violet. I'm hoping Pokemon could continue doing what I feel they have been doing in the last couple sets and just modern in general. Modern Pokemon, I will say, has been freaking awesome. They're doing a really good job at, adding different rarities, whether, it's like these alternative arts, stuff like this. I think sometimes it's a little bit too much. But now that they're bringing back Crystal Pokemon, maybe that whole thing, I haven't really seen any leaks from Scarlet and Violet, which like just blow me away. They all look very similar, but I think that's a very good thing, meaning they're actually holding back a lot of the good stuff. So I'm hoping Pokemon could continue to just put out like fantastic art set after set after set. And by them releasing great art and great chases, it's going to keep people's very engaged and very active. Like The fact, and Jake mentioned it earlier, the fact that people love modern, he said he loves that fact. He loves that people love modern. And me, I feel the same way. When people love modern Pokemon, I love that. So I'm hoping Scarlet and Violet is a banger. So that's what I'm hoping for the next year.
Yeah, I have like those two responses in my brain. Like one that's freaking awesome that is that expensive and that everyone loves it. And then my
Yeah.
other voice is like, be careful, guys. This scares me.
Yeah.
I have
Always
like
be careful, but
yeah, it's like I have those two voices. And then I have also a voice of just like, is this even fun? Yeah. This stuff
and
being expensive so that nobody can open it. Like it's just stressful. Like
yeah,
modern Pokemon being very expensive is I find stressful because it's like this, I guess I just like it being like fun and affordable, reasonably affordable to rip. And it's sort of that sort of thing. If I'm being honest, but I also get that like it is fun in another way when you can pull like $1,000 card or like $500 to $1,000 card like that.
yeah,
That is that is cool that you can pull that out of like a $4 pack. Like even if the odds of pulling it are extremely low, like it's possible. And so I get why people, are want to rip Evolving Skies, for example. Even the fact that they might pull it provides some of that excitement.
yeah. And if you truly, truly love the chase and you just the gambling factor and the truly the chase, if you love that, we are in, I would call it almost like a golden age of the chase. Because when you look at these modern sets and you got your of just all the actually pretty much Vivid Voltage, with the rainbow Chunkachu, and then alternative arts and even battle styles, and Chill and Rain has tons of them, and Evolving Skies has all those great ones, and Brilliant Stars has all these great ones, and Astral Radiance and Lost Origins, and now Silver Tempest with the Lugia V. I mean, there's a card in every single one of these sets that I don't recommend you going out trying to open this card, but if you truly, truly love that chase, like this is like this golden time of beautiful chases where there's been very few stinker sets. So I can also see that we could be very negative about Pokemon, but we could also be very positive. And I just told you how we started this whole video talking about how the chase is like brutal for this stuff and how we don't want to open it, but we were also able to segue it into the chase can also make this fun for you. See, it's a circle, the circle
Yeah,
of life.
we're cautious individuals.
Yeah.
So
We're
we're
just, yeah, we're hyper aware of what's going on. It's just sometimes you got to just strap yourself in and go for the ride.
a little bit of neuroticism and worry.
Yeah. Uh, have you seen any good questions in the chat you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, sure. I could start picking some out. Someone is asking me, Philip Sousa said, what's the last set, if any, that I like went in on? Do you regret or have nostalgia for that set now? And he was talking about like how you said you went into like Cosmic Eclipse and got a bunch of that. So I mean, the last set that I've opened quite a lot of in Pokemon was actually Burning Shadows. And by a lot of, I mean like more than a case. I've opened like 1 to 2 of most booster boxes now from the last few years, but never more than that, and most only 1, and or like an ETB or a couple of ETBs or something. So, and what was the other part of your question? Do you regret or have nostalgia for that set now? I mean, I don't know about nostalgia. Like, I'm picky with word choice, and I feel like when people talk about nostalgia for like X, like I guess it is nostalgia for 3-4 years ago, but it's like it feels a little strong to talk about that word for me in just a year or 2 or 3 years. But I like that. I like that set. It was fun to open. It was fun to chase. A lot of people don't like Burning Shadows because if you didn't pull like the Rainbow Rare Charizard, it like wasn't fun for them. I had a great time trying to pull that card. And I enjoyed the Rainbow Rares a lot. And so there were a lot of Rainbow Rares. I also like the full arts from those eras. A lot of people don't like the full arts because they just have like the blue, the blue or the pink or that sort of, background. And I like them. I guess I like every era and I like Pokemon. Like I feel like I'm fairly easy. I think it seems to me that I'm easier to please than the average, much easier to please than the average person, and that I run into, although I have a theory on why. But I'm also a lot less like hyper positive. But the reason I think that's true, I actually think most people are like me, but the people online are always like the loudest people, and the people talking tend to share really strong opinions. So it's mostly very strong opinions. So you hear a lot of like strong negative and strong positive opinions on things, when most people are more like, I like it, but it's not like the greatest thing ever. And I think that that would be my guess, that a lot more people are sort of like me in this hobby, and somewhere in the middle on a lot of these eras and sets and things.
Yeah.
And maybe get swayed a bit by the stronger personalities and the stronger opinions out there.
Sometimes it can be hard to just talk to yourself about Pokemon into a screen, to not have a strong take on something for an hour. Just like talking. I can only imagine what it would look like if you didn't know anything about Pokemon and somebody was just standing right off screen watching you talk about this. They'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My girlfriend has asked me those questions many times. Like, what are you doing? Why do you care about
Why? Yeah, why does this matter?
It's like fair.
Yeah, it's
like it
you can
matters
never win that argument
because
either.
we
It's like,
enjoy it.
good
It's
point.
like it matters because we're having fun and we enjoy it.
Yeah. Uh, so, have you seen any other good questions? So, Brian Brian said, ever since I started collecting comics again, it changed my perspective on the Pokemon hobby. New alts are similar to variants, although Pokemon has the chase, it's helped me understand the psychology. So it is interesting, Brian brought up collecting comics, because you have brought up this point. I've heard you say this now on a bunch of different lives, like comics, there's a lot of reprints for comics and they're worth nothing. Pokemon, for whatever reason, like changes that argument, because when you look at like the base set Charizard, okay, base set Charizard should be the most expensive. That's the original, that's the rookie card or whatever, but it was reprinted in base set too. Then it was reprinted again in Legendary Collection as a holo, as a reverse holo, as the non-holo from the starter deck. And then it was reprinted again in Stormfront as an alternative or reimagined artwork as a secret rare. Then it was reprinted again in Evolutions, that it was reprinted again in Celebrations, and
So I think
every one of those cards is the chase card of all the sets I just listed,
so I will say that Evolutions and Celebrations, the prices have tanked to the point where like those cards are not ridiculously expensive anymore. Like the holo cards, right? And I think that I don't know what they'll do in the future, but so I will say that. Now, that pattern, so there are reprints in Star Wars cards, in sports cards, in comic books that have retained value, but the only ones that retained really good value were of like the very, very key sets or cards. One, which Evolutions obviously and Celebrations obviously did, the most key cards in the hobby, I would argue. But the other key piece is that they were very short printed, way shorter printed than the original, and they were specialty sort of items that were meant to be expensive, and for a variety of reasons, serialized, to only 100 printed, 50 printed, 10 printed, 1,000 printed, whereas the original maybe 1,000,000 was printed, the new one now there's only 10 or 100, etc. And that is the combination I would look for a reprint to be successful. And there are no historic examples where that has not happened from another hobby that I'm aware of. There's no example of where there's a reprint, like a mass reprint, where there was, 100,000 or, whatever, of an item, and that managed to be like very expensive. And there are extreme examples of like, and age doesn't do it. And this is what I always try to tell people. People have this mythical idea of what age can do to things that is wrong. So there are reprints of like Action Comics #1 and reprints of like the first appearance of Batman, right? From 1986, 10 years before Pokemon was even a thing, that are worth $60. The originals are 3 million, 4 or 5 million. And those are and there are more, and there are like not tons of them around. Like it's not like, and so it just shows that like um that age, like supply and demand is the most important thing. And age impacts supply and demand, but you have to understand how it impacts supply and demand. Don't just think of like part of the problem. So older, rarer, minter, better from S. M. Pratt is a good saying, but people misuse it a lot and don't understand sometimes what those fundamentals actually mean and how they actually affect supply and demand. So for example, like age can affect supply because there can be attrition. So if things can get damaged, things can get lost, the longer something is in existence, more of the booster box can get opened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then age can also affect demand because people can want to rediscover something that's been lost, or the fact that something now feels old or feels vintage can make it more exciting or more enjoyable or something like that, where people want to go back to it, right? So those two things matter, but they're not as important as like the basic, like oftentimes they can just get destroyed by having too much supply. So we'll see what happens to that in Pokemon. Obviously in sports, there's lots of reprints, some fakes, and that's a whole nother thing of like key rookie cards, basically worthless. So we'll see.
So this is a super easy question. I think this will be quick, but I liked it. It's different. Professor Birch said, PK and Jake, what was your favorite non-Pokemon video game and cartoon growing up? I can answer this super quick. Video game, it was GoldenEye for N64 is my favorite game of all time. And my favorite non-Pokemon TV show was The Simpsons. I was a huge Simpsons fan growing up. I watched every episode on Sunday night for years and years and years and years, all the way up till I went to college. So those are my two answers.
It would really depend on the time frame because I had like a number of different ones that I really got into. I would say like there was a time where like Harry Potter would definitely have been the number one. There's a time where like Yu-Gi-Oh probably would have been the number one. And then Star Wars, I was always a big Star Wars fan too throughout it. I would say Harry Potter if you got me in the right few years. And then for favorite video game, I played a lot of GoldenEye. I played a lot of like a variety of different NBA games. I played a lot of Blitz.
Oh yeah, Blitz. Love me some Blitz.
And then a little bit later, I played like a lot of like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. I had those.
I'm sure if you, Jake, if you went down in my basement, I'm sure there's some old 5-star notebook binder sheet that still has like my Crash Bandicoot code from when I was in fifth grade or whatever.
I love Tony Hawk games. I love the backyard games. Maybe I'll choose the backyard games, like backyard baseball,
like on the computer, like on the PC.
I loved
with the kid.
Games.
Was it like the kid in the wheelchair was the best player?
he was good. Yeah, he was good. The best was Pablo Sanchez in most of the games.
Okay, yeah.
And then I love Pete Wheeler because he was fast.
So this is an interesting question. So I think I missed. Oh, so Dougie Fresh said, PK, do you think Scarlet and Violet will continue the slow block starts like Sword and Shield and Sun and Moon? And I know what he's talking about, like Sun and Moon. Well, even you could go back to even XY, like XY base as a set, when you really look at it, you kind of take out the full art Blastoise, you take out the full art Venusaur. XY base sucks. Sun and Moon kind of sucks. Guardian Rising kind of sucks. And then same thing with Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield base kind of sucks. Rebel Clash kind of sucks. Like I understand what he's saying there, like that those real early sets are kind of lackluster. But when you go back to in the moment, everybody's always pretty excited about this because it's introducing all these new Pokemon. Like people were super excited about like Solgalia, and people were very excited about like Sword and Shield, like Zashi and Zamazenta, like the highlight Pokemon of the era. And then yes, as the sets get older and older, people start to really like the chase card from the older generations. As you look at like your team ups and your Unbroken Bonds and Cosmic Eclipse, like the chase card becomes those Gen 1 Pokemon again.
one thing that is really interesting in the Pokemon, like I almost said finance world. So it's like market talk. God, we're so pathetic. Market talk sort of world is that we don't talk a lot about the Pokemon themselves and what Pokemon could be more expensive in the future. And whereas like sports is all about like prospecting, and now part of it is because like these are
That's a
young
great point.
players, and they're having careers, and they're going to have stats, and they're, you know, people are, so much of the sports market is driven by people who love like sports gambling, and they love prospecting and buying these like sports players and then holding the really expensive card while they watch the game. You know, very understandable why that would be a huge dopamine rush for anyone who loves gambling. Whereas in Pokemon, you know, we just don't have, so like one video I've thought about making, I just don't think it's that useful, is like, you know, talking more about, you know, what Pokemon, the fact that like newer generation, like legendary Pokemon, mythical Pokemon,
Yep.
starters, like, or key Pokemon that are like important in the games, or important in like the anime, or important in whatever we think are like the biggest, you know, media, that the Pokemon company is sort of putting front and center in their variety of like, you know, mediums that they put out. There isn't a lot of like speculating or talk that like we think this character is going to like be talked about more here, and that it's going to, you know, go up in value. It's very much just like, these are the top 30 most popular, and they're pretty like always going to be or continue to be. And it's just interesting. So I've speculated a decent amount on like legendaries from new every, so base set is often a set that I think is undervalued of a lot of these eras, because base set often has a key chase card of like, just as PK was saying, of like the new key legendary or mythical Pokemon from the era, and basically nothing else. Like that seems to be the pattern. Now, what base set, part of why base sets have not been valuable is it seems like Pokemon has the habit of like the second half of the era adding like a new cool thing that people
Yeah.
really like a cool different type of card. And you know, in this era, it's like it's been like amazing rares, radiance, and alt arts. More obviously there were alt arts, and you know, everyone always pushes back and says, but the first alt arts were in Sun and Moon. Yes, but like, you know, I think these are a sort of different class of alt arts and have a different sort of makeup, and people are relating to them very differently. So
Yeah, but XY didn't really have that. You know, Breakthrough, Breakpoint, Fates Collide, Steam Siege, Evolutions.
yeah,
It was, I guess, Evolutions it's just,
well, I'm trying to think. I mean,
there's
um,
break cards.
there's break cards, which is the exact same as amazing rares.
Yeah.
And then the secret rares,
Yep.
and the way they did the secret rares. I'm trying to think about what each set had. And then there was also things like gold cards added into random sets like Dragon Majesty, like here and there.
Yep.
But then there was also that stuff earlier on. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't always follow that pattern. There was also like some base sets had their sort of standout-ish card, but the last couple seemed to have somewhat of a pattern. Although, again, trying to predict that Pokemon is just going to continue the same patterns can always can always get you burned, and they can always shift what they're doing. So we'll see.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if they came out with something, you know, in one of these first sets that really like was totally different. You know,
I think they might.
yeah.
I never underestimates Pokemon's ability to just create awesome chase and awesome artwork. Like,
There's a lot more that they can do with color, like alt art, but like colored in a variety of different ways, that I think could be really interesting. Making it more uniformed. I'm not sure how people will feel about that, because I think part of why people like alt arts is the variety. I think there are positives and negatives to that. I do think it makes alt arts less collectible in a sense, because when you have something that ties them all together or feels very similar, I like that aesthetically. There's like a balance, and when they're all like very disparate and very different, it almost makes them less connected for me. But I also like them for that, you know. So I feel I I think that, everyone's like negativity towards rainbow rares are like, if you put them all in the binder, you can't even tell which one is which. It's like that also, yes, but that also makes them, they're like makes them enjoyable and all connected. I mean, there's a reason why like these ghost rare things are very expensive from a variety of hobbies, like Yu-Gi-Oh, like in other places. Harry Potter, for example, everyone loves them there, but not here. There's a lot of irrationality, and a lot of narratives that I don't think will hold up psychologically in the long run of what people actually like, and patterns that I've seen from like an art perspective or from a collectability standard in the long run in other hobbies. So we'll see.
Yep. All right. Sadly, I have to wake up early for work tomorrow because it is still a work night for me. But with that said, Jake, I always appreciate you coming on the channel. I always appreciate you, giving me your time and just chatting. So
Appreciate you too, man. Thanks for all you do, for the hobby. Keep doing your thing here and keep making videos, and we all appreciate it.
yeah, man, and I was really, really, really happy to finally got to meet you in person in Denver. It was a lot of fun. And I did see a question in the chat earlier. People were asking about Orlando. I will not be in Orlando, but I don't know. Have you decided if you're going or not?
I am planning on going. So unless something comes up and changes it, I will be planning on going to Orlando. But I don't have like my tickets and everything
Okay.
yet. So I guess I'm not like 100%, but I'm 90 some percent.
Yeah. So right now the Collecticon I'm leaning towards is Charlotte, but that's not till September. So I think that might be the big one. And it's kind of unfortunate that Charlotte seems to almost piggyback right before Denver, which from right now the spacing's a little bit too close. So I probably won't be able to do both. I'll probably just be doing Charlotte next year, but
I probably won't be doing Denver either next year. I'll probably be doing Charlotte too. I probably am gonna do, if I had to guess right now, I'm probably gonna do Orlando, Charlotte, and a Texas one, maybe for a different
and if
destination.
we could ever get an event closer to New England, I'll definitely be there. So
We're working on it.
let's hope one day that happens. But
Yeah. And we're definitely gonna have, for sure, we're gonna have some more of the smaller ones that Nick and I put on. And we're also gonna hopefully have a big one. So we'll keep everyone, in the loop with that.
All right. Sounds good, Jake. Have a good night. And for everybody else out there, I know I could say with 100% certainty, I could speak for myself and Jake. We appreciate every single one of you guys out there. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be doing these lives. This hobby would be a lot less fun if it wasn't for all you guys. But with that said, we'll catch you on the next video.